The bright lights of Studio 9 in New York buzzed like electricity. It wasn't just another episode. It was a night the audience had been waiting for. The host, Jake Sullivan, stood center stage in a sharp navy suit, holding a mic that glinted under the hot lights. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake smiled tightly, though his eyes looked tense. "Tonight's show is going to be different." The audience, half in red MAGA hats, half in loud Hollywood fashion, leaned forward. The studio was a volcano, ready to explode. "And please welcome," Jake continued, "comedian, actress, and talk show legend, Rosie O'Donnell." Cheers erupted from the left side of the crowd. Boos came from the right. Rosie walked in confidently, wearing a long black blazer and heavy boots. She waved, soaking in the chaos. "Thank you. Thank you," she grinned, holding the mic like a sword. "I love how half of you hate me already. That just means I'm doing my job right." Laughter, whistles, shouts. Jake stepped back, giving her space. He knew what was coming, and part of him didn't want to be near it. "Let's get to the point," Rosie said, pacing the stage. "Donald Trump, the man who thinks money can buy loyalty, even in a marriage." She paused. The room went quiet. 3 wives, 1 fake smile, and the current one? Melania? Girl hasn't looked happy since 2005. Seriously, has anyone checked? If she's blinking in those photos? More laughter from her side. Some in the back clapped nervously. "MAGA fans, don't worry," Rosie winked. "I know she's your queen. But come on. If I were married to a man who made me hold hands like it was a hostage situation, I'd look dead inside too." A loud boo came from the front row. Rosie pointed toward it. "Ah, we've got a patriot in the house." Jake raised a hand, trying to regain control. "Rosie, let's—" But she wasn't done. "Tonight," Rosie shouted over him, "we've got a guest who says she's here to defend the Trump marriage, his youngest ever press secretary, the brave voice of loyalty, Karoline Leavitt." Cheers, jeers, a sharp mixture that echoed around the walls. "She'll tell you that love is real in that golden tower," Rosie smirked. "But I'm here to say, fairy tales don't start with cheating and end with prenups." The audience roared. Jake looked down at his earpiece, clearly getting frantic signals from the control room. "Rosie," he said again. "She wants to fight for Melania?" Rosie continued. "Maybe she should ask Melania if she even wants to be saved." Backstage, Karoline Leavitt stood still. She had been watching the entire segment on a small screen. Her team stood nearby, nervous, whispering about timing and talking points. But Karoline didn't speak. She stared at the screen as Rosie ripped through everything she believed in, everything she had built with discipline, loyalty, and love for her country. Her lips were pressed tight. Her hand held the edge of a chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her phone buzzed. A text from her communications director. "Do we strike back now or later?" Karoline didn't reply. Then Jake's voice echoed from the screen. After the break, Karoline Leavitt joins us live to respond. The crowd's reaction thundered again. Rosie bowed as if she'd already won the night. Karoline handed her phone to her aide without looking. Her voice was calm, but sharp. "She made this personal," she said. Her aide looked at her. "So, do we adjust the notes?" Karoline finally looked up, her eyes steely. "No, we don't adjust anything." Outside the stage doors, producers began to count down the commercial break. Back inside, Rosie sat confidently at the center of the set, sipping water, smiling at her fans. But somewhere deep in the building, Karoline Leavitt stepped into this hallway, heels clicking like warning shots. The real show hadn't even begun. The hallway was quiet, but Karoline's footsteps echoed sharply as she walked toward the stage entrance. Her aide Ellie rushed beside her, whispering final notes. "Talk about values. Don't let her pull you into drama. Stay calm. Stay sharp." Ellie said. Karoline didn't respond. She wasn't thinking about talking points anymore. She was thinking about the moment Rosie mocked Melania's smile, mocked loyalty, love, and everything Karoline had fought to defend in Washington. The stage manager stopped her at the curtain. 2 minutes, he said, pressing a finger to his earpiece. Jake will introduce you. Rosie's still on stage. Karoline nodded silently. Behind the curtain, she could hear the crowd. Some were laughing. Some were yelling. And Rosie, still smiling, still in control. Jake's voice returned. We're back with Rosie O'Donnell, and now joining us, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. There was applause. Some warm, some mocking. The curtain parted. Karoline stepped out into the bright lights. She wore a crisp white blouse under a navy blazer. Her face was calm, her stride unshaken. But her eyes? Focused like a hawk. She didn't look at Rosie right away. Instead, she looked at the audience. She scanned the room, seeing both her supporters and her critics. She knew what she walked into. Jake stood between the two women. Karoline, welcome. You've heard what Rosie said earlier. Would you like to respond? Karoline smiled softly, only with her mouth, not her eyes. I didn't come here for applause, she began. I came because truth matters, even when it's unpopular. The room grew quieter. Rosie leaned forward, arms crossed, ready to pounce. Karoline turned to face her. You mocked a woman who stays silent under more pressure than most of us will ever understand. You laughed at her because she doesn't give the media what it wants. Drama, tears, chaos. She's not real, Rosie snapped. She's a prop. Karoline raised her hand, stopping her. You think being quiet means you're weak, Karoline said. But I've met Melania. I've seen how she carries herself. She's not a prop. She's a mother, a wife, and a private woman in a public storm. The audience was still now. Even the lights felt softer. Rosie opened her mouth, but Karoline continued. And let's be honest, she said. You didn't come after her because of her words. You came after her because of who she married. That's not comedy. That's cowardice. Rosie scoffed. Oh, please, you want to defend love? Go ahead, but don't expect the rest of us to ignore hypocrisy. Jake tried to cut in. Let's keep this civil. I am being civil, Karoline said, turning back to him. But we need to stop pretending that mocking someone's marriage is just entertainment. If this were any other First Lady, the media would be screaming about respect. A low murmur passed through the audience. Karoline stepped closer, calm, but firm. You've built a career on speaking your mind, Rosie, and that's your right. But just because you have a mic doesn't mean you have moral authority. Rosie blinked. For the first time, she didn't know what to say. And if you want to mock love, Karoline added, mock loyalty, mock a woman for staying in her marriage, fine. But don't pretend it's brave. It's not. It's easy. What's hard is standing for something when the world wants to tear you down for it. The audience started clapping, quietly at first, then louder. Jake looked between them. Well, this certainly turned into more than a debate. Rosie looked uncomfortable now. She reached for her water, lips tight. Karoline didn't gloat. She simply turned back to the camera. There's a reason we're so divided, she said. It's not just politics. It's cruelty disguised as comedy. Truth buried under sarcasm. I won't play that game. I never have. The clapping grew stronger. Even a few people from Rosie's side joined in. Jake stepped forward, wrapping up. That was Karoline Leavitt, everyone. We'll be right back after this. The lights faded slightly as the show went to commercial. Backstage, Rosie walked off fast, not speaking to anyone. Karoline returned to her dressing room, her face still composed. Ellie followed, eyes wide. You didn't even use the talking points, she said, stunned. Karoline sat down, pulling out her phone. I didn't need them, she said quietly. She gave me everything I needed the moment she made it personal. Her phone buzzed again. Hundreds of new messages. One stood out. A message from someone unexpected. You didn't just defend me. You reminded the world who I am. Thank you. Melania Karoline looked at it, smiled faintly, then locked her phone. The war of words wasn't over. But round one? She had won it without raising her voice. Back in her dressing room, Karoline sat still. The lights above her were soft, but her pulse hadn't settled. She had gone toe-to-toe with Rosie O'Donnell, and the world was already reacting. Ellie peeked in again, holding her phone high. It's blowing up, she said. Trending #1 on X. Hashtags, Karoline strikes back and Rosie shaken. Karoline didn't smile. Rosie's not done, she said calmly. She'll hit back, probably before the next segment's even over. And she was right. In the studio, Rosie had already pulled aside a producer. She was furious, not just about what Karoline said, but about how the audience responded. She had expected applause. She got silence. She thinks she can walk in here and preach? Rosie barked, voice hot. I'm not finished. Get me the footage. I want it ready. The producer hesitated. Rosie, the network's asking us to cool the segment. They don't want it to go political. Too late, Rosie snapped. This is personal now. Meanwhile, Karoline's phone kept buzzing. Journalists, political staffers, and White House aides were all reaching out. Some praised her. Others warned her. The president's office had already called twice. She stepped outside her dressing room and walked slowly down the backstage hallway. She needed air. Outside, the city buzzed with evening traffic. Fans had started gathering near the studio entrance, holding up phones and signs. Some chanted her name. Some booed. Cameras flashed as soon as she appeared. A security guard stepped in. Ma'am, we can take you out through the service elevator if you'd like. Karoline paused. No, she said. Let them see me. She stepped forward, waved briefly, then walked past the crowd toward the press van waiting at the corner. Inside the van, she turned on the live stream of the show's next segment. Jake Sullivan was back on air. But this time, Rosie wasn't alone. The network had added a third guest, someone Karoline didn't expect, a former political advisor. And not just any advisor, David Cross, a man with deep ties to both Washington and Hollywood, known for leaking internal memos to the media, known for spin. Jake introduced him quickly. Joining us now, David Cross, former senior advisor and media consultant, to weigh in on today's fiery exchange between Rosie O'Donnell and Karoline Leavitt. Karoline's expression darkened. Cross smiled calmly from his seat. Well, Jake, that wasn't just a political moment. That was a chess move. And I'm afraid Karoline made a dangerous one. Jake leaned forward. How so? Cross folded his hands. By defending Melania so strongly, Karoline opened herself up to scrutiny. If she wants to tie herself to Trump's family values, then people are going to dig. And I mean dig deep. Rosie grinned again, her voice sharp. I already got an email minutes ago, she said. Old pictures, old texts, stuff from when Karoline was working campaigns upstate. Karoline's eyes narrowed. They're going to come after my past, she said aloud. Ellie turned to her. How bad is it? Karoline didn't answer right away. They're not going to find anything scandalous, she said. But they will twist everything they can. Back on screen, Rosie pulled out a printed screenshot. It showed a blurry image of Karoline from 6 years ago, standing at a fundraising event with a controversial donor. Here she is, Rosie declared, holding it to the camera. Standing with a man who once said women should be seen, not heard. That's who she defends. The host tried to interrupt. We don't have the context. But Rosie was on a roll. She wants to lecture us about respect and decency while standing beside people who laugh at the very idea. Karoline stared at the screen, calm, steady, but her jaw tightened. "Ellie," she said, "schedule a press call in 1 hour and tell Jake's producer I want back on the show tomorrow, prime segment." Ellie blinked. "You sure? This could get ugly." Karoline's eyes didn't leave the screen. "I don't run from ugly. I face it." A moment later, her phone buzzed again. It was from the White House. "Need you in the Situation Room by 9 a.m. tomorrow. It's bigger than Rosie now." She stared at the message. "What could be bigger?" Ellie asked. Karoline looked at her. "Rosie's not acting alone. Someone's feeding her this. Someone with power." The street outside was louder now. Protesters had joined the crowd. Some held up signs. Some waved flags. Some screamed. Karoline turned away from the window. "If they want war over truth and dignity," she said quietly, "then they picked the wrong woman to challenge." Tomorrow she'd have to fight on 2 fronts. One in the studio, one in Washington. And both were about to explode. Inside a dark government building in Washington, D.C., the Situation Room lights hummed quietly. It was early morning. "Karoline?" Leavitt walked in, dressed sharply, her heels tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. She carried a file under her arm, eyes focused. No smile. Across the long table sat 3 senior advisors, a legal counsel from the Department of Justice, and General Marcus Reynolds, head of intelligence. Karoline nodded once. "You said it's bigger than Rosie O'Donnell. Prove it." "General." Reynolds tapped his tablet. A screen behind him lit up with surveillance footage. "Yesterday's talk show," he said. Rosie wasn't alone in that attack. She received material, emails, images, and internal memos from an encrypted address that traces back to a political PAC operating overseas. Karoline raised an eyebrow. "Overseas?" "Yes," said the DOJ lawyer. "Specifically a shell front based in Brussels. We believe they're tied to a network of influence groups, some with hostile intentions." Karoline leaned forward. "So this wasn't just celebrity drama. It was coordinated political sabotage?" General Reynolds nodded. "Exactly. And Rosie was their delivery system." Karoline opened the file she'd brought. Inside were transcripts from the show, timeline screenshots of how quickly Rosie's comments went viral, and social media patterns from bots pushing anti-Leavitt hashtags. She pushed it across the table. "My team flagged this last night. Someone tried to spark a character assassination campaign. But it's more than that. They want to break public trust, especially among women and independents." The DOJ lawyer sighed. "We've seen it before, just not this bold." Karoline stood. "I have a second round with Rosie tonight. Live. National television." The advisors shifted uncomfortably. "You're still doing the show?" one of them asked. Karoline turned. "They tried to bury me. That's when you dig harder. And tonight, I bring proof." Back in New York, Rosie O'Donnell was in a private conference room at the studio. She looked exhausted, but determined. Across from her sat David Cross, again, the political fixer. He was holding a USB drive. "This is the last round," he said. "Old footage, campus debates, comments she made back in college, unpolished, emotional. Use it right, and you can shake her image." Rosie frowned. "And if it backfires?" David shrugged. "It's live TV. If she crumbles, we win the ratings war. If she fights back, well, then you better have a second act ready." Rosie leaned back in her chair. "Let's hope she crumbles." That evening, the studio was brighter than ever. 2 extra security guards stood near the entrance. Protesters and supporters clashed outside with chants and signs. News vans from every major network were parked on the street. Inside, Jake Sullivan stood backstage, fixing his tie nervously. Karoline stepped into the studio with confidence. She wore a navy blue blazer, No jewelry, no flair. Just steel in her eyes. Jake walked over. I know things got heated yesterday. You sure about this? Karoline nodded. Let the audience decide. They walked toward the stage. Cameras rolled. Lights dimmed. Applause and shouts rang out. Jake raised his hand. Welcome back, America. Tonight, a conversation that's taken the internet by storm. Please welcome back Rosie O'Donnell and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Rosie entered first, holding papers in her hand again. Confident. Ready. Karoline followed, calm and composed. The tension was electric. Jake opened. Rosie, last night you criticized Karoline and the First Family. She responded fiercely. Today, it's round 2. Let's keep it honest. Rosie wasted no time. She held up a video on her tablet. This is Karoline Leavitt, age 21, shouting down a debate opponent on free speech. She called him a coward hiding behind a flag. So much for dignity. The video played briefly. Karoline didn't flinch. Jake looked to her. Karoline, your response? She leaned forward. Thank you, Jake. And thank you, Rosie, for showing the world how desperate the opposition is. Gasps from the crowd. Karoline continued. That clip was from a 2018 college debate. I was defending survivors of sexual assault who were being silenced. The man I called a coward? He threatened to publish the names of those women. The crowd murmured. And Rosie, Karoline added, turning directly to her. You used foreign-supplied material to try to humiliate me. You quoted fake emails, twisted photos, and now you're showing videos without context. Jake looked shocked. Foreign-supplied? Karoline pulled out a printed document. This, she said, is a chain of emails connecting the source of Rosie's leaks to an international PAC with ties to a hostile foreign power. We've confirmed the digital fingerprints. The Department of Justice is reviewing it now. The audience gasped. Rosie tried to speak. That's not true. Karoline cut her off. You didn't just come for me. You became part of an operation to poison public trust. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm not afraid. Silence. Then applause. Rosie sat frozen. Jake blinked, speechless. Karoline turned back to the crow. The clip of Karoline Leavitt exposing the foreign link spread like fire. By midnight, it had already reached 20 million views. Headlines screamed across TV screens and social media. Karoline fights back, with receipts. Foreign PACs fueling. Celebrity smear campaigns? Rosie O'Donnell left speechless in live clash. Back in D.C., the White House was on full alert. Press Secretary Leavitt had turned a celebrity ambush into a national security concern. And now, intelligence agencies wanted answers. At a press conference the next morning, cameras flashed wildly as Karoline walked up to the podium. She looked calm, measured, serious. Good morning, she began. Last night, on live television, I revealed a coordinated attempt to discredit not only me, but the values and leadership of this administration. She paused, then added, We now have confirmation from federal analysts. The digital materials used by Ms. O'Donnell were indeed funneled through a shell group based in Brussels. That group is under investigation for ties to political destabilization efforts in multiple countries, including ours. Gasps from the press pool. Hands shot up. Does the president support your decision to confront Rosie live? A reporter asked. Karoline responded quickly. The president supports truth over spectacle. And when that truth involves foreign influence targeting American voices, we don't stay silent. We act. The room buzzed. Karoline left without taking more questions. Back in New York, Rosie O'Donnell sat quietly at her apartment, the city skyline glowing behind her. Her phone was off. Her publicist wasn't answering. Her show had suspended taping until further notice. She stared at the television. Every channel was replaying the moment Karoline pulled out the DOJ document. The email chain, the timeline. It looked airtight. Rosie whispered to herself, "What have I gotten into?" Just then, a knock at the door. It was David Cross, the same political fixer who'd given her the final video clip. But now, he didn't look so confident. "You set me up," Rosie said, voice shaking. "You said it was safe." David raised his hands. "I didn't know the DOJ was tracking it. You were the mouthpiece, not the planner. They're not coming. After you." Rosie stood, furious. "The whole world thinks I'm part of some foreign propaganda circus." He tried to stay calm. "Then control the story. Get ahead of it. Say you were misled. Blame me." Rosie froze. Her pride said no. Her career said yes. She looked away. Meanwhile, Karoline was in a secure room with agents from Homeland Security and DOJ officials. They displayed a map of digital traffic between PACs and American influencers. "This isn't just about Rosie," one of the agents said. "There's a wider network, paid campaigns, fabricated stories, and they target outspoken figures like you." Karoline nodded. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," the agent replied. "But now it's evolving. They're moving into live media, reality shows, talk shows, anywhere there's emotional impact." Another agent added, "Your move last night exposed one arm of the operation, but now that it's public, they'll try to bury it fast, or come at you harder." Karoline looked down at the file in her hand. Inside, her own name, flagged in a cyber intelligence alert from months ago. She realized something chilling. They'd been tracking her long before Rosie ever said her name on air. "This wasn't random," she said softly. "I was always the target." The agent nodded. "And now you're the one with a spotlight. That's power and danger." That night, a new host, Rachel Veer, filled in on the talk show where Rosie once ruled. "Welcome back, America," Rachel began. "Tonight we examine the fallout from Rosie O'Donnell's viral confrontation with Karoline Leavitt. Was it comedy gone too far, or something deeper?" A split screen showed clips of Karoline's calm exposure and Rosie's stunned silence. Then Rachel turned serious. "What we now know is this. The material used to attack Leavitt appears to have foreign digital fingerprints. Rosie O'Donnell has not issued a public apology or explanation. Sources say she's considering legal counsel." On the screen, a quote from Rosie appeared. "I was misinformed. I never intended to spread anything unverified." But the damage had been done. Karoline had turned defense into offense. She hadn't just defended her name, she'd cracked open a bigger story. And that story wasn't finished. In her apartment, Karoline sat alone. Her husband, Nicholas, entered with 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I'm more than okay. I feel alive. Like everything's clearer now." He smiled. "You shook the whole country." She looked out the window. "No, Nicholas. I just held up a mirror." He sat beside her. "What now?" Karoline turned toward him. "They'll try again. Maybe not with Rosie. Maybe someone new. But I won't back down. Not now. Not ever." She lifted a folder off the table. Inside it, new files, names, connections, emails flagged for review. The fight had begun on a comedy show, but now it was turning into something far bigger, and Karoline Leavitt was ready for it. The White House briefing room was quieter than usual. Reporters looked tense, whispering to each other as they waited for Karoline Leavitt to appear. It had been 48 hours since the live confrontation that shook the entire country, and now rumors were flying. Would Karoline step down? Was Rosie going to be charged? Were foreign powers actually funding celebrity attacks? When Karoline finally walked in, There was no smile on her face. She wasn't there to charm. She was there to inform. She stood behind the podium, adjusted the mic, and began without notes. We now have confirmed evidence of a media influence operation that stretches beyond entertainment. It targets the trust of the American people. She paused and looked across the room. This is no longer about Rosie O'Donnell. This is about a system designed to divide us by using public figures, viral moments, and false narratives as weapons. The cameras zoomed in. Every word was being broadcast live. Karoline continued. We have passed information to federal law enforcement regarding shell packs connected to overseas accounts. These groups paid to boost misleading content during live programming, using algorithms designed to manipulate emotions. A reporter jumped in. Are you accusing Rosie O'Donnell of being part of a foreign op? Karoline answered carefully. I am accusing a system of using her, without her full understanding, as a vector of disruption. Rosie may have thought she was delivering a joke, but what she shared was sourced from compromised material. Another reporter asked, Has she contacted you? Karoline nodded. Yes, through her lawyer. She expressed shock and fear. Murmurs filled the room. Then Karoline looked directly into the camera. I want the American people to know. This is not about political sides anymore. This is about sovereignty, about our democracy. We are stronger than chaos, but we must stay alert and united. She stepped away from the podium without taking further questions. The room erupted behind her, but she didn't stop walking. Back at Rosie O'Donnell's apartment, the mood was far darker. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Elena Haas, paced the living room. You're lucky they're not pursuing legal action, Elena said firmly. But you need to say something. A statement, a press conference, something. Rosie sat in silence, knees pulled to her chest on the couch. I didn't know, she whispered. I really didn't. Elena sighed. I believe you. But this isn't just about you anymore. There are hearings being scheduled. You might be called to testify before Congress. Rosie's face twisted, with anxiety. I can't go there. They'll destroy me. No, Elena replied, leaning down. They'll destroy whoever planned this. If you cooperate, you could help stop the next attack. Rosie stared at her. A spark of resolve returned. I want to speak, she said quietly. Not with jokes, just the truth. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Karoline sat in a closed-door meeting with the president and top intelligence officials. A large monitor on the wall showed a flow chart. Foreign media influence campaigns, stretching from Europe to Asia, all targeting cultural institutions, talk shows, podcast networks, digital influencers. One name on the chart was circled. Vox Nova. Strategies. Karoline leaned forward. That's who funded the attack. The intelligence chief nodded. They've used different names before, but the funding leads back to the same offshore accounts. Cyber teams traced part of the Rosie content to their servers. The president spoke up. So this wasn't about Trump or Leavitt. It was about disruption. Karoline nodded. And it worked, for a while. But now we know. The room went quiet. Then the president looked her in the eyes. You made the world pay attention. Good work. Karoline didn't smile. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt determined. That evening, Rosie appeared on a live stream from her apartment. She sat in front of a plain black curtain, without makeup, without an audience. Hi everyone, she began. I want to talk, not as a celebrity, but as a citizen who got something very wrong. She took a deep breath. I made a joke about the president's marriage. I thought I was just being Rosie. But what I didn't know was that the content I used came from a manipulated source. A group with bad intentions. I should have fact-checked. I didn't. She looked straight into the camera. I'm sorry. To Karoline. To viewers. to anyone I hurt. I may not agree with Karoline politically, but what she did, exposing this, was brave. The comments section exploded. Some praised her honesty. Some called it too little, too late. But most were stunned. Because Rosie had. The Senate hearing room was full, cameras pointed in every direction. News anchors whispered into mics. Phones buzzed constantly. Something unusual was about to happen, and the entire country was watching. On one side of the long, polished desk sat Karoline Leavitt. Calm, focused. Dressed in a navy blazer, a single flag pin on her lapel. Her face didn't show nerves, only purpose. Across from her, under oath, sat Rosie O'Donnell. She looked tired, but not afraid. For once, her jokes were silent. Her hands were folded neatly on the table. America was about to see her as they never had before. The chairwoman of the hearing, Senator Reynolds, gave a small nod. "You may begin, Ms. Leavitt." Karoline turned on her microphone. Her voice was steady, echoing through the chamber and across live TV feeds. "Thank you, Madam Chair. The events that happened last week were not just about a viral video or a talk show gone wrong. They were the result of a deeper issue. Psychological manipulation of the American public." A murmur passed through the room. Karoline tapped a folder in front of her. "This document includes evidence gathered by multiple agencies. It shows that a foreign-backed media strategy group, Vox Nova, had been feeding targeted misinformation to entertainers, influencers, and even journalists. Rosie O'Donnell was one of many." She turned toward Rosie, not in anger, but with clarity. She became a vessel. Unknowingly, yes, but her platform was weaponized. Rosie took a deep breath. When the chairwoman gave her permission, she leaned into her mic. "I agree," Rosie said, "and I take full responsibility for repeating information that wasn't verified. I thought I was being clever, not careless. I never imagined I was being fed material that came from outside this country." The room was silent now. You could hear pens stop moving. She continued, "When I said what I said about President Trump's marriage, I believed it was just a joke, but that joke was designed to provoke. I see now that I was part of something bigger, something dangerous." Karoline nodded slowly, not with approval, but with acknowledgement. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a joint warning. "Senator," Reynolds leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt, do you believe this is still ongoing?" "Yes," Karoline said. "The campaign to divide us is not over. It's evolving. Today it was a comedian. Tomorrow it might be a musician, a pastor, a teacher, anyone with reach." "Why you?" Reynolds asked. "Why target you?" Karoline paused, then spoke truthfully. "Because I'm loud. Because I challenge narratives. Because I don't play their game. That makes me dangerous to them." She opened the folder and pulled out one document. This was traced directly to a Vox Nova shell company. It was a script suggestion, disguised as a research note. The goal was to humiliate, to bait, and to create a viral clash on national TV. And it worked. For 48 hours. The document was handed to the clerk. It would now become part of the congressional record. Rosie looked at it and shook her head slowly. "I've done comedy for 30 years, she said quietly. But this was different. This time I felt like someone else was writing my punchline. After the hearing, as Karoline exited the building, reporters swarmed. "Karoline, is Rosie forgiven? Do you feel vindicated? Will you run for office in 2028? She stopped only once, in front of a young reporter from an independent news site. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here for the truth. And now the country knows the truth wasn't what we thought it was." Then she walked away. That night, a national town hall aired on primetime TV. The network brought together people from across political backgrounds, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, to talk about what had happened. Rosie appeared remotely, again from her home. Karoline appeared live, sitting under the same stage lights that once held their fiery debate. This time they were not opponents. They were survivors of the same manipulation. "I won't agree with Rosie on policy," Karoline said, "but I can say this, she owned her mistake. And that's more than most people in Washington ever do." Rosie smiled faintly on the screen. "I still think you talk too fast," she joked. The crowd laughed. The tension broke, for the first time in days. Then Rosie added, "But I also think you're one of the few people up there who actually believes what they say. And that's rare." Karoline nodded. For a moment the room was quiet, not from fear, but from understanding. As the credits rolled, news outlets everywhere praised the moment. From viral clash to national healing. Karoline and Rosie, the unexpected wake-up call. Foreign influence exposed through one American mistake. The story had started with a cruel joke. It ended with a warning, and a promise that Americans would no longer be silent about the games played behind the scenes. In the end, the truth wasn't destroyed on live TV. It was revealed, loud, clear, and impossible to ignore.